So welcome. Um, and, I think in many ways, she sort of described us and described this way. She said that Beyond All Stereotypes and the novel, Elsewhereans, is one of these books that sort of is um, difficult to place, right? And I was, sorry, is that me? No. And I was just talking to somebody at Harper while we were at the venue and while you were having another conversation, and I was just saying that in many ways that the book sort of reads like a memoir, okay? So in your heart, when you're reading the book, because it's based on real people, you sort of feel that it's real, but your brain keeps telling you that as you write, the truth lies in between, that it is fiction, and you're sort of stuck in both of these worlds where you're feeling as well as your brain is trying to tell you that this isn't real, and the truth lies in somewhere in between. And I wanted to ask you really about how you got to starting to write and the journey. You said you started writing 4 years ago?
Yes. Well, 4 years before the book appeared. Anyway, hello, pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be back in Jaipur. It's been a long time. Pleasure to be back with this book, actually. Yeah. The thing is, it took 4 years, but it wasn't until about 2.5 years into the writing of the book that I knew what the form of it would be. And it's an unusual form.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a coined form. I made it up. And as soon as I realized that it was not going to be linear, that it would be partly fiction, partly a memoir, partly a travelogue, partly a ghost story, partly a detective story, all brought together in these episodic chapters that tell the story of one woman, actually, Amu George, whose story begins and ends the book. Once I knew that, and it took about 2.5 years into writing the book for me to realize that, it became very easy. Then everything fell into place, all the moving parts locked.
Yeah.
And after that, it was just very fast. It finished quickly.
But it took you that long. But in many ways, it is also, it's not only about, these different parts, but it's also the fact that you put in your father's journals, you have pictures. So it's not only really these different sort of genres sort of coming together, but it's also more intimate because you're sort of looking through almost like a family album where you're telling the story and you're sort of meandering between memory. And I wanted to ask you, because you say at the end of the book, where you're talking about starting to write, and your father at that point of time is about 94, and it's COVID, they're in Kerala, and your mother says, Amu says that she's kept the letter that he writes, and then the narrator says, the narrator says, well, at least somebody has was worried about the future.
Was thinking about the future,
right? So, this is, it's sort of what you really feel is this urge to remember them at the end of their life, because you're sort of also talking about your father's novel that he never writes. Can you talk about that, about sort of trying to capture this part of your parents' life where you say you go and live with them, where you don't have to call them up and ask for answers and it's just around the road. Can you talk really about that, about trying to make sense of their life at a time when their own lives and memories are fading?
Well, my mother was 91 and my father was 97 when they died last year. They both died last year in January and in October. And so while I was writing it, my mother was in her late 80s.
Yeah.
But I would just come across something. I would need a date or a time, or I'd want to know the sequence of events at some particular point. And I'd just go across the house to the other side where my parents lived, and I would ask a specific question. And it was incredible the kind of detail that she remembered. He was far less sure of his dates and I think maybe less interested in the past, whereas with my mother you got the sense that the past was a living thing with her.
Yeah.
So that was truly kind of helpful to have the source material right there and to not have to, you know, it was like having a living archive.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go to a library. I had all the materials
right there
available right there in the house, including photographs and letters and documents of my father's arrest in Bihar when he was editing a newspaper called The Searchlight, and he took the side of the students against the chief minister, whose name was K.B. Sahai, and who had him arrested. And he was in jail for about 4 weeks at Hazaribagh Central Jail, and it was actually the single event that made his career. It made him famous overnight. There were telegrams from Indira Gandhi, and Krishna Menon came to defend him, came to Patna to defend him. And he, of course, couldn't return to the Searchlight, but he went on to Bombay and from there took a job with a magazine in Hong Kong. And all these stories he had never told.
Yeah.
You know, he came from a journalist, a generation of journalists who would never start a sentence with the first person.
Yeah, you write that.
I was forbidden. The word I was forbidden. So it's always kind of third person and in passive voice. And so I just felt that these stories needed to be told, you know. Another incredible thing, he started a magazine called Asia Week in Hong Kong that was bought by Time magazine and shut down. Because Time wanted to use the resources, the amazing photo library that Asia Week had built up, the incredible reporting that Asia Week had done. It was a magazine for Asians, by Asians, about Asians. The only such thing to this day, in fact. So Time wanted all of that to shore up their consistently failing Time Asia. And they bought it and shut it down. And as my father used to say, the insult added to injury was they said that the magazine was shut down because it wasn't economically viable, it wasn't selling, whereas actually it was selling 130,000 copies a week. So to say that, you know, and somewhere in the book I say that the magazine didn't fall prey to the usual assassins of men and magazines, but which is Time with a small t, but to Time with a capital T in italics. So again, this was a story that my father should have told, should have written, should have made a memoir or a novel out of, but he never did, for whatever reason. So I just felt it was my job, really, to bring those stories into the light and to tell them. And
You know, I also want, you know, you talk about your father's and this memoir that, you know, he should have done. And I think in many ways it was also possibly because that generation didn't really see their own stories as part of as important to tell. The story was always outside. It wasn't really, you didn't document your own self. Like you said, he didn't write about himself. But I would also, I wanted to draw attention to the picture on the book. And it is a picture that your mother didn't want you to use, right? So can you talk a little bit about the picture and why she didn't want to use this? And then maybe read a little bit from that passage that we decided. Yeah.
I'm just going to say before I say the story that one of the points about this book is that the reader should never know which bits are real and which bits are fictional. Like I say in the beginning, The real names and photographs in these pages are fiction. The fictional names and events are documentary. The truth, as we know, lies in between.
Yeah.
So
it's very much like that game that people play, right? Tell two truths and one lie, and you never know which one is the lie, right? And the lie is actually something which is possibly more believable than the two truths that you tell.
Often, yeah. So I'll just say that this picture is of a Vietnamese woman in Saigon in 1975. And in the story, there's the suggestion that she and my father, when he was a younger journalist, had a romantic connection. He heard this story, which I'm not going to tell you whether it's true or not. Mm-hmm. That's going to stay covered by the mists of time. When I asked my parents, my father was very happy with this idea, you know, and the photo and everything. My mother, of course, being much wiser, was not. And they did give me permission. My father instantly, my mother far more reluctantly, because she knew from Narcopolis, for example, that appearing in a novel doesn't mean that you're going to come out looking very good.
Yeah.
In fact, it might be the very opposite. So she knew that already. Of course, there was never any question that she would say no. You know, she said yes, and she would have absolutely appreciated in fact, the opening epigraph in this book, which is by the poet Czeslaw Milosz, where he says, "When a writer is born into a family, the family is finished." I think any family with a writer in it would agree with that sentiment.
So, do you want to read the bit from...
This is in the Vietnam section chapter in the book, where the narrator has taken Ambien and red wine to fly and has a hallucinatory kind of psychotic episode in a hotel in Vietnam and sees a ghost. And this is the ghost. This is the ghost thinking. She wore it every chance she got, alive or dead or in the 1,000 places in between. Soft tan leather with a fringe of fine strips that hung from the waist to the knees and swayed when she swayed. He had found it at a vintage store on St. Mark's Place. Such a fit, like it was custom made. Even now, in the half here, half there world she had created for herself with her own 2 hands and her restless, unwise feet, performed such sudden violence upon her person that she hadn't fully left the world, was still in it, still happy to sashay in the rain in her leather vest and blow his fucking mind. What did she remember? A shred here, a number there, dry heat, ceiling fan, soundlessness, April 1st, All Fool's Day. Why she did it, she couldn't say. Some trivial thing, a tiny leap backwards for womankind, a small step for woman. She stepped off the desk and tried not to struggle and remembered the girl at boarding school, the one she had bullied. All in white, the children in their white pinafores like dead girls miming a vision of the end. All in white, but for the ribbons, frayed red satin sifting in the breeze. This is the worst night of my life, she said. But it was nothing. A night like any other. The end of a certain phase of being, not so different from the one before and the one before that. The world of innocence had left her the moment she joined the school as a child. The sweet world had never returned. In her vision of the dead girls in white, the angel of the end stood over them, rejoicing at his meticulous handiwork. When his eyes came to her, they filled at first with glee and then with sudden tears. She understood the glee. He had done his job and done it well. The tears were a mystery. "Don't cry, baby," she said. "Everything's going to be all right. Silence is best, don't you know?"
So, you know, the book is also about grief, and that passage is sort of. But I wanted to talk about. You end with "silence is good," and this silence plays an important part in the book where you talk about your father, for example. That's the code, the family code, right? And he retreats into silence, and you talk about the silence as a weapon in many ways, and the relationship that he has with silence. I think when I asked you whether he read the book, and you said by which time he'd sort of rendered himself speechless. He didn't speak very much, right? Can you talk about that bit about silence and the code of silence that you talk about that defines your relationship, and how that bit about how silence plays a role in your life, how does it shape you, especially as someone who writes poetry, does music, and how does that sort of fit in?
My father came from a long line of silent men, a generational thing where men were encouraged not to talk too much, to keep pain to themselves, to not ever talk about anything to do with the emotions, to never be friends with their children, to never expose themselves in any way, to kind of play the idea of a father. And that's kind of hard baked into the genetics of, certainly of that family. All the men have it.
Yeah.
And my father, towards the end of his life, also because he was deaf and he had become much deafer and refused to wear a hearing aid, kind of chose deafness and chose silence. He would be at a party, at home with all kinds of people, and he'd just sit in a corner and kind of benevolently look at everyone, smile, and not say a word. And he embraced this kind of world where he didn't speak and he didn't really hear.
Yeah.
Or what he heard was a choice.
Selective hearing.
Selective hearing and very selective speech.
Yeah.
And I think we all made allowances for that, and learned to live with it. As an inheritance for a writer, I don't think it's too bad an inheritance, because poets are very well versed in the annals, in the liturgy of silence. You use silence as a literary tool.
Yeah.
Poets compress language. They would use one sentence rather than 10. It's the difference between fiction and poetry.
Yeah.
You compress, you occult, you use less. Less is far better than more. So I don't think silence as a genetic inheritance is too bad for a writer.
I think you write in the book where he says the reason it's called mother tongue is because mothers talk, right? Isn't that what something missing? So the book starts off with a dedication to your mother, right? And you say that to Amu, who preferred fiction, right? And it ends when you're trying to be a son and when she's in hospital and dying, right? And she keeps asking whether it's cancer, right? And you keep telling her it's not, while she knows the truth. So can you tell me why you chose fiction then?
I think the great gift that families give each other is the gift of lying. Because if you were to tell the truth to each other, if parents were to tell the truth to children, or if children were to tell the truth to parents, it would be unbearable. Nobody would be able to handle it. It would be just too much to take. And I think, especially in my family, my mother especially wanted me to lie to her. She would ask me a question like, have you been drinking too much, or are you smoking? And I would say no. And it would be a kind of a comfort, the comfort of lying, It's something she absolutely wanted. And also it's something that I was trained to do as a child by her. And it works both ways. When she was in hospital and dying of multiple myeloma, which is a very severe bone cancer, my sister and I never used the word cancer in all those years. In 5 years, we never used the word cancer. And she was a very intelligent woman, so when we would go to the oncology ward in the hospital, she obviously knew what oncology meant, and but she went along with our lie, or our lack of clarity about the truth. She went along with it because she appreciated it. So it's a kind of a mutual pact, I think, that some families make to never tell each other the truth.
Yeah, or in some ways it's called nazar ki sharam in this thing, where you sort of know, like, if somebody, well, now I don't think it applies anymore, where you're sort of a smoker and somebody who's older than you passes by, you sort of hide the cigarette even though there's smoke coming out. So you sort of, they know you're smoking, but you're not smoking in their face, right? Nazar ki sharam. So it's a lihaz, okay? Sure. Right? And the idea is that in many ways, so it's a comfort even with both sides. So like, you were not telling her the truth, and she sort of, maybe the comfort in the lie was also sort of knowing that, possibly protecting you from knowing that she knows the truth herself, right? And I don't think
a mutual pact.
A mutual pact. And I don't think children can ever, as we said, you also do it to protect your parents, because they cannot take the truth at some point of time. They become sort of addicted to the comfort of lies. And speaking of which, the Elsewhereans is also really about travel and about migration and belonging and home. And, you talk about where home isn't, where you've talked about Bombay, you talk about your parents' home in Bangalore, you've traveled to see. Where is home now to you?
Right now it's a hotel in Jaipur. Home shifts constantly. Whenever I go back to a city that I used to know, I feel at home. And I never miss cities that I used to live in. I never miss Delhi.
Well, nobody misses Delhi.
Except when I'm there. Yeah. When I'm in Delhi, I miss it a lot.
When you're away from Delhi, you miss it, right? I think it's the idea of Delhi, too. And Delhi as a city which is not home to anybody. But, you write at the end of the book about your mother and the idea of home, where her idea of home is really the home that she grew up in. And
which has changed so completely that when she eventually returns to home, in quotes, it's not home anymore. She feels like an outsider. And that really, I think that's a universal feeling at the moment. Even if you've never left your small town, and you've lived in your small town all your life, that town has changed so swiftly and so irrevocably around you that you don't feel like it's your home anymore. You feel like an outsider in your own hometown. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people share today. And it's also allied with the fact that today if you ask someone, where are you from? No one has a one-word answer.
Yeah.
Or even
Yeah.
a one-sentence answer.
Yeah.
It'll take you a paragraph, if not a page,
Yeah.
to explain where you're from. And that's, again, that's a universal condition. Everybody feels it. We all travel so much. We are all kind of internal migrants, if not geographical migrants. We're moving from one political situation to another, from one emotional ecosystem to another. It never stops. And you are not who you were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the world isn't what it was 10 years ago. Your
True.
town isn't what it was 10 years ago. So it goes. And I think also that sense of unbelonging,
Yeah.
it's hugely creative.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean. But it's also the idea of travel in the book, right? And I was, in many ways, you know, when you talk about Vietnam, and we had this conversation where you talk about how now, if you look at Vietnam, it becomes, as you said, the new Thailand, where you have these Instagrammable pictures of what Vietnam is, but the history isn't this beautiful place with, you know, lotuses and this thing. There's deep history, right? And there's deep pain. And the only person, I think, in the book who doesn't really travel out is the granddaughter of the woman on the yeah. She's the only one who is from Vietnam, who is happy at home and travels within her home, but doesn't travel
And
out.
helps other people to travel.
Yeah, and tries to sort of rectify the image that you really have. And I wanted to ask you about the idea of travel in a world where, you know, where seeing the other or where nuance is missing. You know, if you look at, you know, you talk about Jesus being a migrant. You talk about the idea of, in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, people just keep traveling, right? And you sort of travel and you move and you learn. But so can you talk about the radical idea of travel when you're sort of looking to be changed? The journey outside is also a journey within, versus the world we live in, where travel is now very much a background and something that you put up on an Instagram post.
Just about one thing about Vietnam, it's deeply moving to visit Vietnam, even as a tourist, and to go to, say, Saigon or Hanoi or Hue, because unlike us, the Vietnamese have done something brilliant. They've kept reminders of history. It hasn't been paved over. History has not been forgotten. In fact, it's been valorized. And there are tanks, there are American tanks, the tunnels are in perfect working condition. And the tunnels are extraordinary. They are work of imagination and engineering. They extend for miles underground. There are hospital areas, there are cooking areas. They are brilliantly designed and engineered. And they've been kept in perfect working condition. Like that, everything that we associate with what we call the Vietnam War and what the Vietnamese call the American War, all those things are still around. And it's incredible to see this tiny sliver of a country. Compared to India, it's a speck. And the way that they have defeated wave after wave of imperialist colonial invaders and managed to keep their culture and their dignity intact, it is deeply inspiring and moving. And that is one country that I found it impossible to visit and not be changed by.
And the idea of travel in this whole space where you feel, I mean, because, I mean, if you look at people, for example, and we've talked about Punjab, where you look at Nanak, who was a traveler, and you look at all the stuff, if you look at the Sufis, or you look at the Bhakt, there is an idea of travel, and instead of, look, here I am, wise, and listen to me. There is an idea of moving and sort of learning from the others. And I wanted to ask you how that, the idea of being elsewhere, of always moving, of home not being one fixed space, how that has made you, how that has changed the way you are. Because in many ways, we're all Elsewhereans, right? And the idea of, as you said, we have all, where do you come from is a page, right?
Or a book.
Or a book, right? How does that sort of shape, and how has that changed who you are in many ways? Not only where you went back home, not only, I think you say that your uncle asked you, and you said you were a migrant, and how he said, how do you like Hong Kong? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, and I didn't know how to reply to that because I'd never known any state of being other than the state of being a migrant.
Yeah.
Migration as a kind of a spiritual calling or a spiritual deficiency even. I don't know whether it's a minus or a plus, but it's certainly a state, as I say somewhere in the book, movement is meaning.
Yeah.
And a static stillness is the opposite of meaning. Travel, I think Naipaul said this a long time ago when he was writing his travel books. He said that when you go somewhere, when you visit somewhere, or when he traveled to a new country, if he didn't make notes immediately at the end of each day, he would return to Wiltshire, and that experience of travel in Africa or South America or the south of America, that experience of travel would flow through him, would disappear. And the only way to hold on to it is to write about it. For me, it's not just a way to hold on to what has happened, it's a way to make sense of it. Because until you write about a place or a person or an experience, you don't know what you think about it. You don't know what it means. It's a set of disparate events, a chaos of sense memories that you can't make any sense of until you order it on the page. And then, like a miracle, it all begins to make sense.
So your father also took down deep notes. So, and I think when you looked at it, there were these diary of notes, and you said, and some of them had a tick mark, and some of them didn't. And you asked, you asked him what the tick mark was for, and he said those are the ones that became stories, right?
All the ticked notes he had used in journalism, and I was appalled to see how many parts of it were not ticked, and how many absolutely brilliant kind of descriptions had never been used. And the descriptions of people especially, they were novelists' notes.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there's a line where he says, stocky man in military fatigues, in olive military fatigues. Yeah. And then he cancelled out
the word military.
Military, because obviously olive fatigues, it's military. So he was editing on the go as he's writing these notes very quickly. He's editing as well. And the kind of notes, the color, smell, the way food tastes, all of it you knew was a way for later when he wrote about it, a way to bring that moment alive. They were absolutely novelist notes. So I made a lot of use of those journals. He had a stack of just Vietnam journals, as well as other travels. And I found it incredibly useful when working on the Elsewhereans.
Did you have you kept the notes?
Of course.
Yeah. So, you lost your mother and your father in 1 year. 1 year of this book. Your mother, you said, saw only saw it on screen, and your father read it. That must have been a really difficult year. It was a year of loss. How did sort of, in many ways, the book had to come out at that year. It's sort of a birth and...
It really feels, I mean, it's just a coincidence also that the book came out the year they both died. My father spent about 4 or 5 days reading the book very carefully, although he didn't have much to say about it at the end of it, unusually, because normally he would have said, oh, you got this date wrong, or oh, no, that's not the way it actually happened. This time he had no criticisms to make, which was unusual for a journalist and an editor. But I could tell that he had absorbed this narrative. And it also was very interesting to me that he didn't find it surprising at all to be a character in a novel. He thought that this is the way it should be, you know. There was no surprise about it, no embarrassment, perfectly happy with being a character in a novel where the character isn't always a good person, you know, isn't always doing the morally acceptable thing, which I thought was a kind of a wisdom as well.
Okay, so we're going to...
I hate to use the word closure.
Yeah.
Because it's just so cliched, but it's difficult not to look at a book that appeared the year its two main protagonists passed away without sensing the last page or the back cover shutting with a loud sound and a door shutting forever.
Yeah, that's exactly, because it sort of feels, I don't know, like, I'm not saying it, but it does feel as if it is the end of an era in many ways. And you know, some news from the future for the young people in the audience. However old you might be, even if you're ancient like me, when your parents die, you feel like a child, like an orphan child. So here's news from the future for you. Okay. At that note, we shall
On
open
that
up...
dark note?
That dark note. We shall open up to the future. Any questions? One right there and one right... So the lady first, and then the young boy.
Hello? Is it? Oh, okay. Hi. So not very related to the session since we were specifically talking about the book, but I've read quite a few of your previous works, and you have a very unusual cadence in the way you write. And just off of that, I was curious to know, maybe in the last year or the last couple of years, what are some pieces of fiction or poetry that you've read and you sort of loved, or they've inspired you, just something exceptional that you really like to read?
You know, that list changes by the day, but I'm always excited and enthusiastic about a pile of books. Lately, I've been reading, for pleasure, I read poetry and thrillers, crime, spy, the bloodier the better. That's what I read for pleasure. But when I'm working, obviously, it's a whole different kind of reading. So at the moment, the writer that I'm just finding everything possible by is a British novelist by the name of Mick Herron.
Oh, I love him.
Amazing.
Yeah, lovely.
Whose books have been made into an amazing TV series called Slow Horses.
Yeah.
And very, very cleverly adapted to film. Because it's not, like, if you know the books, you know that several books have gone into one season, but done so very cleverly, and the world that's evoked is just astonishing. And you know, every once in a while, somebody comes along and the critics say that this is the new Le Carré, and it's not true. But in Mick Herron's case, he really is the new Le Carré, because he knows secrets. He knows things about the British intelligence establishment, MI5 and MI6, that you wonder, how does he know the way the bureaucracy works in these very secretive organizations? It's just such a pleasure to read. Mick Herron.
Yeah, he is. And it's also, what is wonderful is that he has this, it's the world that Likar forgets. Right? It's post that, right, where there are no morals, where it's a completely, this world is shifted, where the Cold War is ended, and, so the London rules and the Russia, and this, it's just, he makes sense of the ambiguity as well as the loss of morality, right?
And what really drives, it's a character-driven series, and the characters are just wonderful. They're very addictive as well. There's a character called Jackson Lamb, who's the kind of the head of this bunch of misfits that nobody else wants to hire, but they can't fire them. So they all end up in this place called Slough House, Slow Horses. And he is, in the first book, when the first episode opens, he's this very physically repellent man, who makes himself unattractive, makes himself disgusting in a way. And then something very strange happens. By the end of the first episode, by the middle of the first book, you are rooting for him.
Yeah.
Because he's the kind of the moral center of that very immoral or amoral universe.
The gentleman, the young boy here.
Sorry if I fumble in forming any sentences. It's an honor to speak to you, Mr. Thayil. The way you write characters which are clearly inspired from your own life have this authenticity, and they lack any sort of fetishization of your own nostalgic version of them. How do I keep this integrity of their authenticity and not succumb to my nostalgic view of them, how I remember them?
I think it really helps to, I wouldn't recommend it, but it helps to work in journalism where you edit other people's work. And when you're a journalist and you have a certain word count, let's say you have 300 words, you have space for 300 words, and you get a piece that's 2,000 words. You learn to be very ruthless with the way you delete or cut out material. And that training, learning how to be ruthless with writing, whether it's someone else's or your own, I think is incredibly valuable. To know how to cut and to not be attached to those things that you cut. This book, for example, was twice its length about 3 years into the writing of it. In the last year, I cut out 50,000 words and made it much leaner and slimmer, and I feel that there are no wasted words in this version. There's no self-indulgence. There's no fat, really. It's cut to the bone, and I think it helps enormously to look at your own work as if it's been written by somebody else. One way to do it is to, after you've finished a piece of writing, put it away in a drawer, figuratively. Don't look at it, and then come back to it. And look at it as if it's someone else's, and be very ruthless with the way you cut. It's a valuable writing lesson.
One more question? Okay. Anybody else has a question? Jeet is going to be signing, so please grab a copy. It really is, it's a book that will stay with you. You're going to, it kept me up at night. I mean, I don't know, it just sort of is a book that is, it's just incredible. It's one of those books that you're going to keep on your shelf and you're going to go back to. You will.
Thanks so much.